Hey, everybody, it's Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. I wanted to give you guys an update on a few things. Just had a great meeting with working on the brand refresh, the vision statement, and a litany of other initiatives. And it's really a cross organizational initiative. So I figured I should talk a little bit about it and explain the context. So we've always cared a lot about brand and visualization. We've always cared a lot to try to represent the mission of Cardano in ways that are not only creative but also beautiful. And it's always nice to bring an external party in, teach them what we're trying to do, and then have them provide an independent opinion of ways we can improve how we tell that story and how we visualize things. And the initial relationship was a little rocky because it took them a bit of time to get over that learning curve. But when we got through it, they finally broke through and started making very meaningful and significant contributions. So I get asked a lot in my AMAs, well, when are we going to see something from McCann? What's the output of this process? The output will be initially the Cardano.org website. We're completely reconstructing the Cardano.org website so that it has both role and behavioral navigation. So roles, developers, enterprises, people who want to use the protocol, and then behavioral navigation. So behavioral navigation is things like you want to govern so voting, you want to develop on the platform, you want to operate the platform, things like stake pool operators, and so forth. And we're finding a beautiful synthesis in all of that. And we're trying to put everything we can into creating a great, beautiful, simplistic yet elegant experience for everybody, including a lot of dynamicism. So we're trying to put that flair that Scott Darby's famous for in those Three.js animations, in addition to good old-fashioned good information architecture. So once that's been set in stone, the next step will be to propagate that throughout all other Cardano assets, the Reddit, and other things that can be brandable. And so make sure that there's consistency in the text, the colors, the fonts, and so forth. And the goal is conciseness. So it's good to have an elevator pitch, good to have a 30-second vision statement. It's good to have all these assets ready to go and socialize throughout the ambassadors and so forth. As with all things we do, as we get closer to a finished product there, we're going to bring on the ambassadors and the stake pool operators first to these experiences and just to get their feedback, almost like a focus group. And it gives us a chance to make some last minute changes. And the Cardano.org asset will be released on par with the release of Shelley. So we're all kind of converging in that point. And we'll probably showcase it at the virtual summit when we do the virtual summit, the launch of Shelley. So that's what's going on with McCann. It's a lot of work. There's a very big team. In fact, that call had over 20 people in it. It's like herding cats in some cases. And there's a lot of difficult conversations because there aren't clear answers on whether we should go with A or B. I mean, this color palette versus this color palette. We have to just kind of think around, and it's not going to be pleasing to every single person because design is like art. Everybody has an opinion, but we hope that for the mainstream, it's something that most people are very happy about. Second, documentation. You may have noticed I tweeted today some documentation. There's about 176 pages of documentation for the benchmarking frameworks we've constructed. Documentation is another huge overall effort that we're pushing very hard for the release of Shelley. Namely, we think that if there's code, it needs to be documented. If there's architecture, it needs to be documented. And if you want to build something with this, you need proper documentation to build something. So we have very high standards, and we are aggressively pushing our developers and technical writers to backfill and update the documentation to be correct, relevant, and current, as well as understandable. This is a less subjective thing. Design, we can all have an opinion on a color palette. Documentation, it has to be useful. And so our users are going to use it, and we're going to get a lot of feedback. It's kind of a blue team, red team model, black team, red team model, where you have a team produce it and then a team consume it. And the team that consumes it with a skeptical and critical eye and tries to actually do things. And they let you know if you've actually hit the mark or not. But that will also be released with the release of Shelley. And we have a lot of people not sleeping right now trying to get all that done, because there's just so much to document and so many things to think about, and it also has to be understandable. So that's something you should look for. Cardano.org website will reference the documentation, and there's going to be a dedicated website for it, probably something like documentation.cardano.org or a domain like that, likely a subdomain. And then IOHK, of course, will maintain relevant documentation. There's probably still going to be some GitHub-based documentation. Source management is a very delicate topic, and where should all this stuff live? There's a lot of open questions about that. And in fact, even the balance between the help desk and Git issues is a big conversation. Speaking of help desk, moving to that topic real briefly, we have gotten probably about 100 or so tickets, give or take, on Daedalus 1.0. A big chunk of them came from people using unsupported operating systems, namely Windows 7 or below. And they said, hey, we're having problems. And I said, well, what OS are you using? And it turned out it was Windows 7. It's like, okay, well, we don't support that. And they said, well, that's not fair. And I say, well, Microsoft stopped supporting Windows 7 January of 2020. So if Microsoft is no longer supporting the software, I think it's pretty fair for us to say that we're not going to support that. We do support Windows 8.1 and above. So likely what we'll do is make it difficult to install Daedalus 1.0 on older versions of Windows. And your options are to either upgrade your version of Windows or to use Yoroi if you have an unsupported OS in that respect. We have noticed another problem, in particular on Mac, for a certain set of users, a very high CPU utilization. Likely what's occurring is there's some issue with logs or some issue with network interaction that's causing a lot of unnecessary CPU utilization. That shouldn't be so high. So we are looking into it. In a later version of Daedalus, we'll patch it for that user set. But overall, we've gotten overwhelmingly positive feedback about Daedalus 1.0, in particular compared to the old Daedalus. And it's a much easier code base to work with. So bug fixing can happen pretty quickly. But I will remind anybody that if you have an issue with Daedalus, please, 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 please submit logs. Don't go to Reddit. Don't go to Twitter. Don't go to Telegram. It's fucking useless. You will not get support and help. You will not get your problem solved. And also, we do not have enough information to even begin to discuss your problem. So you are trolling if you go to these channels. The reason the help desk exists, the reason why we spend money with dedicated support people and they work every single day, we get tickets every single day, is so that we can have a structured way of examining not only your problem, but solving your problem. If you go to Reddit, Telegram, Twitter, or any other channel, you are not helping, you're hurting. You are not contributing, you're hurting. The help desk exists. It's not going into oblivion. People work full-time jobs specifically to do this. And you're wasting my time, your time, and everyone else's time, and you're just complaining. Okay? So do not go to Reddit. Don't go to Twitter. Don't go to Telegram. Don't go to other channels. If you're experiencing a problem, submit a help desk ticket. And then we can, in a structured way, look at your logs and get a sense of what's going on. If you don't want to do that, you will be ignored. I've instructed the ambassadors, I've instructed my own people, don't reply or even pay attention to these things. We might even just start deleting these threads on Reddit. They're not helpful to anybody. So if we want to have better software, the only way we're going to do that is by getting enough information to understand which configurations and situations are creating issues. The only way we can do that is through a structured process and getting logs. That's it. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's basic software 101. Okay. So that's the story about the help desk. Now, onto Shelley related stuff. You may have noticed that we had a tweet. I had a tweet where I tweeted a message from Duncan. So how we built Shelley is that we constructed it in a collection of pieces, and now we're basically wiring those pieces together. And Duncan was the first person to wire all of those pieces together for the new code base, and actually was able to launch his own node and network and make blocks with it. This is a massive internal milestone because it basically confirms that all the things we thought about integration were true. Now, there's a lot of rough edges there, and they have to be polished, and that's basically what the team is doing right now, is they're pulling things together, improving the CLI experience, and very rapidly will converge to a point where it makes sense to share that experience with friends and family for further QA verification. After we clear that stage, the next step would be a public test net where everybody gets to download and try out a command line Cardano node, meaning they can install the node. The node will allow them create a stake pool, delegate to that stake pool, and we can get broad scale verification that the network, the consensus algorithm, the staking mechanics are working properly. Okay, that is primarily intended for stake pool operators. So the 1,000+ actors who on the ITN are creating blocks right now, this gives them an opportunity to try out all this stuff and for us to talk around some last minute system parameterization. For example, the pledge amount, et cetera, et cetera. Once they're comfortable and used to that experience, the next step will be the balance check testnet. And that's for everybody. So that's going to be dataless with the new user interface, the wallet backend fully linked up, and the node together, all three components. That will contain the state of both Byron as well as all the new Shelley state. And what that effectively means is that when you download that and restore your wallets, as I mentioned in the wallet video that I did, and we'll have further content for that, you'll be able to verify your ITN rewards reported over properly and that your Byron balance looks proper. Now, that testnet is also going to be good enough for people to integrate exchange listings and other such things against it. And it's a high fidelity environment, meaning the experience and integration they get there will also be an equivalent experience to when we launch Shelley. So balance check is effectively like a beta Shelley. And if everything goes well there, then the next step will be launching the client for people to download. Now, this client will be Byron interoperable, and it'll have all the Shelley code in it, but that Shelley code will not activate until we have the hard fork. And that hard fork will happen likely 4 weeks after the Shelley client is launched. Okay, so this will give everybody proper time to be able to upgrade exchanges, to be able to redo their infrastructure so they can support staking and other such things. It's the only responsible way of doing it because it's the most significant upgrade. And then, as I mentioned in the prior video, then we go to the Shelley hybrid phase, where once we've done the hard fork, then stake pools can register, start making blocks, and the network will become increasingly more decentralized rapidly over time. So that's the structured IOHK way of launching these things. You start with a small group, small circle, and that group basically allows you to have a sanity check that the things you think are true. Then you give people an opportunity to migrate. The single most important group of people to migrate are the stake pool operators, and that's what the first testnet is about, the node with the CLI. And that migration should happen very quickly. And because we did that initial version for friends and family, there's going to be not just people from IO to help people migrate, but also people within the community who have enough skill sets to do that. There's 1,000 people. That's a lot of coordination, but we want to do it as quickly as possible. And then the balance check is really our last opportunity to make sure that everything's been checked off. And then at that point, we launch that Shelley client. And then everybody's downloading, installing the Shelley client. And we're seeing, just like with the Byron reboot and the Daedalus flight program, a wave of people migrating over. And then we do the hard fork at the tail end of that. And then we've fully entered the Shelley phase. And at that point, the network will gradually decentralize, hopefully as rapidly as possible. And we'll wake up one day and the D parameter will be 0. And the Shelley era, it was a complete success. I think this is the first time in the history of cryptocurrencies that anybody's tried to do something this ambitious in terms of transitioning from a federated system that is static and federated to a dynamic and decentralized system, and do so with as many users as we have, with completely new protocols that have never been tested before outside of the tests that we've done. So it's a colossal undertaking, and it's a lot of work, but it seems like we are definitely on target and on schedule. In terms of specific dates, I no longer announce those dates. Those are announced by Aparna, and they will be announced if we're going to announce dates at the product updates. That's the time to do it. So this upcoming product update that we have on the 30th, 2 days from now, you will get some dates, and that's a good reason to dial in and listen in. There's tons of other content that will be produced. Highly recommend it. But every time we do one of these things, if there are dates to announce, there's a strong probability that something will be announced. And these are firm dates, meaning that we don't anticipate they're going to slip at all. Our internal roadmap is mostly conformed to reality. We're basically right in those margin of error windows that we've seen. So the things that we thought about when Shelly was going to ship a little while ago have still held. So that's a very encouraging metric. And our development velocity continues to maintain the remarkable pace. In fact, you may have noticed, if you look at Cardano updates and all these metric sites that are actually accurately reporting, we are number one for commits, and we are the most developed cryptocurrency in the entire industry. And then before anybody shouts, oh, but those are just commits and commits are meaningless, please challenge them to point to commits that were meaningless. Every commit we make follows a structured pattern. There are processes, and it has to be meaningful. There are no superfluous commits in the commits that we make. Every one is a small brick or a large brick in a wall that we're building, and every single brick is necessary to build that wall. We're not just going and changing a single string or character of text. This is a very meaningful metric, and it's a good example of development velocity. And perhaps the more meaningful thing is the level of parallelism amongst teams. You'll notice lots of commits from the Daedalus team, the Wallet backend team, the Node team. There is no single block of code in Shelly that is updated once and then we wait 6 months to touch it again. Everything is dynamic. Everything is growing as we go. And we're actually even starting to get community suggestions for improvements. In fact, for the ITN, we got over 250 suggestions for improvements. And we've been slowly working our way through that list and making sure as many as possible that were reasonable are included in Shelly. So Shelly is a done deal. We're marching towards it. We have a good strategy, I think, to get us there. And I think the virtual summit's going to be a phenomenal event in terms of timing of when we're going to announce it. When we launch the first Haskell testnet, right when we do that, we'll also launch the website for the virtual summit and registration for it. As it's a virtual event, we can have a shorter lead time, but we'll have a lot of great presentations. And the team has already selected a vendor, and they're already working on getting all the speakers lined up. It'll be a Cardano-oriented event. So Emurgo will be there. The Cardano Foundation will be there. The ambassadors will be there. We'll probably have Philippe and Rick and the rest of the gang do something like with the Cardano Effect live stream with the virtual summit. We'll make sure that everybody's there, and it'll be a big, big celebration of what has been accomplished and a big discussion about where we're going and the cool things that are coming. And of course, there'll be a few surprise announcements as well, just to get everybody excited about where we're going. You're going to be very excited about the infrastructure around Cardano, not just Shelly. So that's pretty much it for the update. I try to keep these things concise where I can, but we also try to keep things as accurate as we can. This is such a complicated project, and there's just so much going on and so many moving pieces to it, and it just gets confusing over time for people. So we try as often as we can to be very clear and specific and precise in the things that we say and do. And given that there are well over 200 people waking up every day trying to get us to this point, it's of course going to mean that just staying at pace with their labors is difficult. Much less understanding the totality of the roadmap. So hang with it. Do attend the product updates. Those are our moments to shine and really get things out there. And all of you are going to be very busy in May and very busy in June. And hopefully everything is going to work out without a hitch. I'm very optimistic about that. Things could, of course, happen. Life is life. But overall, things are looking pretty good. And we're pretty excited about where we're going. And frankly, the foundations of Shelly, once that's out, are going to be just like the foundations with the Byron reboot, such a beautiful piece of software to continue to work on and build on. So it's going to be a lot of fun to get to Goguen, and it's going to be a lot of fun to get to Voltaire and roll these things out and pull these things together. And as we exit 2020, there will frankly be no cryptocurrency in the world, in my view, that will be as decentralized, as good of a development experience from a functional sense, or to develop on top of, or list. And this is really just a testimony to the work of the engineers, the product people, the scientists, and others who really thought carefully about where we'd like to go. And it'll just simply make everything else look like a toy. So, to all of those who've stuck with us, thank you. And until next time, have a nice day.